good morning. Welcome. Glad that you're with us as we wrap up this series on parental guidance. Next Sunday, we get going on a new series that we'll do. It's almost Christmas. You guys excited? This place is going to be decked out in Christmas in just a few weeks. We're going to do a short little series called Getting Over It. And next week, we're going to focus on resentment. That'll be next Sunday. You want to be a part of that. It's going to be really good. But we're going to wrap up the stuff with kids. And I have a guest with me. Actually, it's my wife of 24 and a half years. I got plans for big 25, I think. Anyway, but we'll, once we get there, we'll figure that out. But anyway, she's going to help me out because for 24 years, we've been together, but for almost 19 years, we've been parents. So we got a little bit of experience on that. We're far from perfect, and our kids will be the first to tell you that. One of them is up in the sound booth, and so if you see any obnoxious things on the board or on the screen, she's in charge up there. But we're far from perfect, but we have a lot of experience, and we've been blessed with a lot of people that have spoken into our lives, and I think we really complement each other well because it's really clear we're good cop, bad cop. I'm kind of the good cop. I'm the very permissive parent, and she's the enforcer.
See, one of the best things up here is I don't know what he's about to say. Sometimes I just sit and listen, just like you guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't tell her about all that, so it's...
Yeah. No, we did. We had a discussion right before today, is just, in our parenting skills, and yeah, that has defined our marriages. Tom tends to be more permissive, and I am more of the disciplinarian, so you'll hear later how that can...
We'll talk about that.
Affect us.
There's nothing wrong with that, too, but we'll talk about it. Hey, but what we're going to talk about today is, and I want her to help out with this, is that there's a really important aspect of parenting, and that's this idea of boundaries. Now, even more than parenting, in your individual life, this concept of boundaries that we're going to talk about is really important. And it might help you, even if you're not a parent or don't have kids. This is something that will be really beneficial in all your relationships, whether it's at work or with people that you know in your families. Since we got Thanksgiving coming up, we're going to see some of those people soon. Boundaries might be really helpful in the next few weeks. We picked up on this concept back when we were in seminary, and this concept came from a book literally called Boundaries, written by Drs. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, really influential in us, I think, in our parenting and just in our relationships. And so we've used that concept over the years. And so in the back of the bulletin, I put the reference to the book that we'll be pulling a lot of this info from, and it's just called Boundaries with Kids. But you can just start with the main book called Boundaries, and they have boundaries in marriage, boundaries with teens, a lot of different aspects that you can talk about this concept of boundaries. And so we're going to talk about that this morning and then apply it to kids. So let's just talk about the big picture of what is a boundary to begin with. So in our neighborhood where we live on Westminster Street, for years there's been no fences, and the kids have just been able to run through all the backyards, which is pretty cool. So just recently we have some new neighbors, and they're awesome. They're great, but they have a dog, and they put in a fence. So it's been so weird to have a fence now in one of our backyards, which is fine. It's all good. But what you realize is now we know specifically where their property begins and where ours ends. And that's really what a boundary is about, is it's kind of a sign, it's a marker that says, okay, I am responsible for this part of the property, or this is my property. I'm responsible for this. It's very clear. And that's always been the case of a boundary. Whether it's signs, fences, back in the day it was a castle wall or a moat. You're like, I'm responsible for this. This is my territory. So it's really clear when you talk about properties, but it's not so clear when you talk about relationships and people. Sometimes we don't know what is ours, what we're responsible for, and what other people are responsible for. And it can get really messy in regards to relationships. So that's why it's really important that we have clear boundaries in our lives. And here's why. Boundaries help define us, and reveal what we are personally responsible for. Okay, whether it's our feelings, our emotions, our jobs, it helps define us and lets us know what we're responsible for and what the other people are responsible for. Now, if you're wondering, is this a biblical concept? The answer is, well, yeah. In fact, the entire Bible is full of examples of the importance of boundaries. First one is found in the very first book of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 2. In that narrative, God, he creates this Garden of Eden, and you actually see the boundaries that are laid out. And what God sets apart is this garden. And then he puts Adam and Eve in that garden, and he gives them specific responsibilities that they are supposed to do, that they are responsible for. And it's actually when they cross over that boundary that chaos ensues, you know. So we understand right away that God has created boundaries and things that we as humans are to manage and are responsible for. Another verse that I think is really helpful for me personally, and one that might be helpful to you to understand this concept of boundaries, is Proverbs 4:23. In this wisdom literature, the proverb is, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Some translations say it's the wellspring of life. So your heart isn't this muscle that beats in your chest. Well, it is. But in this case, it's talking about your true you, your personality, who you are, the true sense of your being. And so what the proverb is saying is, listen, you got to guard that thing. And not with a brick wall to not let anything in or out, but kind of as a gate, because you need to protect that, because it protects your identity. And you got to make sure that you're filtering things that come into your life and that you're protecting it. And that's what Jesus came to transform, is our heart. So we need to protect that and know who we are and not let outside things come in and impact that or change that. And so we see the Bible teach us that this is an important concept that we understand and that we clarify. And so what we want to do is just talk about maybe a few examples of how this works in everyday life that maybe we've seen in our marriage. We'll talk more about parenting later, but what are some general examples of boundaries in relationships?
Well, just like our neighbors putting up this fence, and by the way, they did cut down 2 trees, and I kept standing looking out from my back porch, their area deck, and thought, what does this mean? They put up a fence. Are we not welcome anymore? What does this mean? And so the problem is reading into it without clear explanation from them, which they've given us. They want to have a garden, so they had to cut down the trees. They want to keep their dogs safe and others safe, so they had to put up a fence. But this can happen in our own lives too. Let's say there's an issue that Tom is always teasing me about.
I'm a teaser.
Yeah.
If you don't know that.
And perhaps it's something like my laugh. You know, I'm not going to laugh for you here because you might make fun of me.
She has a beautiful laugh.
Tom would, make fun of that laugh or whatever. So if I have to set a boundary for him, I'll be, Tom, that really hurts me when you laugh at my laugh. That, I don't appreciate that. This is what it does to me. So from now on, if you're going to start teasing me about my laugh, then I'm going to leave the room. And you're not welcome to come back unless you say, stop doing that, have an apology, and that we can kind of move on from that. And then if he violates that boundary, well, then I might tell him, no jokes for you. No more jokes. You can't hear me laugh any longer.
That's right.
But that's, kind of a general basis. We have that in our relationships and our lives as well. It might be with family members or friends. There are those points where you say, no, this is the boundary. I cannot let you pass that because of what it does to me. And maybe people have to set those boundaries for us. But the point is that you have not only a fence, but you have a gate. The gate is there for open dialogue. It's there for open relationship where you haven't shut that permanently because we have to do life together. Obviously, if we've stuck it out for almost 25 years, we have to learn how to do life together. And so boundaries and gates are important.
Yeah, so she's taking ownership for her feelings. So when she feels upset or when I offend her, she's letting me know, as opposed to yelling and screaming, right? Or, silent treatment. She's being being really clear. I feel this way right now, and instead of getting all angry, I'm just going to be really clear. The boundary is, hey, that hurt me, and I don't like it. And so I have a responsibility to figure out, am I going to keep doing it because I like doing it, or do I respect her and the boundary that she set, and I want to honor her in that way? And so that's maybe a basic way, but you can take those and use them in the workplace. You can use them with family members that's going to come up, neighbors, just being really clear, like this is where I'm responsible, and I'm going to take ownership of my life, my feelings, my things, and that's what God has given me control over, and I just want other people to know that in my life. So that's a boundary. So now, let's talk about that with kids, because that's really what this is all about. Like, how do we apply boundaries to kids, and why is that important with kids? Because kids come into the world with no boundaries, none. Diapers, anyone? I mean, that's they have no idea like where to go and what to do. I mean, we don't even try to give them a bowl for their Cheerios. We just throw it on their plate because we know that they're not going to stay within the boundary. In fact, before you know it, they're going to be all over the floor. So kids come in with no concept of boundaries, and so part of our responsibility as parents is to help instill those boundaries into their lives, because we don't want an 8, 9-year-old running around in diapers, because that means they're not getting this concept of what a boundary is. So that's part of what we're trying to do, is begin this process, and parents, you know this is a process that takes the rest of your life in some regards, is helping instill these boundaries, these godly boundaries into the lives of our kids. I'm going to give you an example of this. This is a good story that actually comes from the book, the Boundaries book. Dr. Cloud tells this story about a couple comes in, a set of parents come in, and they sit down in his office, and they're like, Dr. Cloud, our son, our 25-year-old son, we need help. We need help. We need you to help us fix him. And Dr. Cloud looks at him and says, well, where's your son? And they're like, well, he doesn't think he has a problem. And Dr. Cloud looks at him and says, well, he might be right. They go on to say that since he's been a young child, that he's never really fit in, that he's always had issues getting in trouble at school, not getting his homework done, and now at 25 years old, he's dropping out of school, and they're trying to find a new school for him. They're concerned about him because the crowd he runs around with, the drugs that he uses, and some of the poor choices that he's making. And Dr. Cloud goes on and looks at them and says, you know what? I think your son's right. He doesn't have a problem. And for a whole minute, you could hear a pin drop as the parents just looked at him. And like, what do you mean our son doesn't have a problem? And he says, that's the problem. He has no problems. You guys are the problem, because you're taking care of everything that happens, right? So when he drops out of school, you're trying to help him find a new school. The problem with drugs, you're getting him out of that. He says it's been all throughout the years, you've been dealing with his problems, and he's never once had to deal with his own problems. All of a sudden, these light bulbs started going on, and they realized how they had been enabling their son for 25 years, and how they needed to start to put up boundaries. And so that's part of what that whole session began, is to figure out ways they could help their son learn to be responsible, that where he had to deal with these problems on his own. And so if anyone here who is a parent, if you feel like, okay, that totally describes me, or I have a teenager, or maybe even an older child, and I'm like, I've messed up. Like, there's no hope for me. The couple that I just told you about, they had a 25-year-old son, and they began to take action steps, and things began to change. It's never too late. It's never too late. You can't go back in the past and fix things. You have to start where you are right now and begin to understand, I need to instill what influence I have in the lives of my kids and start putting some boundaries into their lives, and so that they can begin to take responsibility. And I just want to encourage you, it is never too late. You always have a chance. And I know Susie and I have talked about that with the people that we worked with over the years, just encouraging them that it's not too late to ever give up on this opportunity.
And sometimes you might feel, or others might feel, that, I didn't establish these good boundaries or recognize this earlier on when we were raising the child, and so now it's too late. It's the damage has been done. We can't do anything about that, even into adulthood. But it isn't too late. You can always start establishing boundaries, and part of that is defining, well, okay, what is their problem and what is my problem? Because when that boundary is not established, you both have problems. As Tom described, that adult child, the problem was the parents didn't allow him to feel the consequences of his actions and choosing that. They took care of it all for him. Well, if you find yourself doing that, it's never too late to start really defining, putting up that boundary. What are their problems? What skills can I give them to help those problems? But ultimately, now they're at a point they need to handle these problems, and I need to step away so that I'm not enabling some choices where they aren't taking responsibility. But it's never too late.
Never too late. So with the time we have left, we're gonna focus on 3 godly boundaries that you can begin to instill in your kids, grandkids, anyone here that works with kids. You have kids in your life. You can begin to work on these with the kids, children, teenagers that you have in your life. And here's the big picture goal, and that is that if we as parents begin to establish these godly boundaries, we're going to provide an opportunity for our kids to live with confidence. And isn't that what we want? This opportunity for our kids to thrive, to be confident. And if they understand these boundaries, man, it's going to set them up for the rest of their life. And so God gives us these 3 boundaries that we can begin. Now, there's actually 10. So if you get the book, Boundaries for Kids, you can go through all 10. We're just going to hit the top 3 that we thought would be really helpful and practical for you guys today. So here's the first one. One of my favorites, the boundary of sowing and reaping. Okay, this is something that's wired into all of creation. We just saw the farmers get done harvesting our fields next door. I saw them in the spring put seeds in the ground, all right? And I just was able to watch them harvest all the corn. That's essentially this law, that you put stuff into the ground and it's going to grow. It's going to, whatever you do to how you plant it, take care of it, there's going to be a result. Now, the Bible talks about this as well. The Apostle Paul in Galatians 6:7-8, he says, a man reaps what he sows. The one who sows to please his sinful nature, from that nature will reap destruction. The one who sows to please the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So where you invest your time and your energy, you're going to reap a reward, a response from that. And we see that in all different areas of our lives. If you work hard at your job and if you're a faithful employee, you're probably going to get a raise or an advancement. You'll be recognized for your hard work. If you're a student, if you work hard, if you go to class, you take your notes, do your assignments, turn them in, do your best on tests, you're probably going to pass your class, you're going to do well. If you save more money than you spend and put some back, when there's a rough time or you need extra money, you have prepared for the future. You've saved. There's this idea of preparing for the future, investing now so that you'll have more later. On the flip side, we know that if you spend all your time playing video games and not doing your homework, you're probably going to fail the class. You're not going to do well. If you eat whatever you want, you're probably going to gain weight. If you yell at your family, if you yell and scream and point and put the blame on them, you're probably going to have separation or distance, probably not healthy, good relationships. If you live outside your means financially, you're probably going to find yourself in debt. It's the whole law of sowing and reaping. And this is such an important law, an important boundary that our kids need to understand and will help them live with confidence. So what's one way that we can do that?
Well, one of the ways is just to make sure that you're recognizing what are the natural consequences to them doing this action or behaving in this way. Because natural consequences are a great teacher. When they do something, they need to experience the problem. And so some of the questions that we can ask, like I alluded to before, is asking, whose problem is this? If your child is, like what happens at her house, Samantha has other things that she focuses on other than cleanliness of her room, or sometimes our living room. And because I naturally like to be a little more organized, Alex was like that, and Tom and Samantha, I appreciate them because they don't get so tied up in that.
That's right. It's overrated.
It's overrated.
Cleanliness.
Yes. However, we do have rules about, how often you have to clean your room. Tom and I
My side of the room.
do that too. But, if there's stuff stuff is strewn all over the place, and they were looking forward to doing something later that week, such as go shopping or playing that video game. If you have given them a clear definition of a boundary of saying, okay, if you don't pick up these things, then you can't go shopping, or you can't play that video game or see that friend. Because you need a natural consequence that gives them a timeline of when they need to have it done. And then if they don't, they will push against this too. You have to actually follow through with those words. So, if Samantha doesn't clean up her room, then I have to allow that natural consequence to happen. So I have to define what is her problem. Well, it's having her room messy. What can I do then to help her experience the problem? Because that's the next step, asking that question. How can I let her experience this? Well, I can not let her do the things that she wants to do, to see her friends, play that video game, or go out with the family. Then you have to follow through with those consequences that are given. The last question you can ask is, what am I doing to keep them from experiencing this problem? Let's say company's coming over, and again, the stuff is all over the living room. I used to pick up the things, kind of resent that I'm having to do that, and then the kid would, get in trouble later because I reacted to the fact that they didn't. But I have to step back and say, how did I actually help them not experience that problem? I had to be okay with that stuff sitting there. And that a natural consequence when they come home then is that whatever we talked about before is going to be removed from their life. That's a natural consequence. So we have to get out of the way for them to experience the problem.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that is just the reward too, making sure that when the behavior is good, sometimes there's natural rewards, like you study hard for the test and they get to A and they're like, hey mom, I got an A. You celebrate that and just recognize and reinforce. Listen, honey, you worked hard. Look at you reaped a good grade. Or sometimes we have to then be there to, hey, let's go out and celebrate. Let's have ice cream. But it's the whole idea of making sure they experience the reward as they have sown correctly. And that whole idea of sowing and reaping is so helpful when kids understand that their effort and what they choose to do does get a return on their investment. All right, here's the second one, the boundary of respect. Every child comes into the world thinking that they're the center of the universe. Isn't this right? And anyone with a young child, you get this, that everything is about them, surrounds them, taking care of them, that's all about them. And part of our job is helping them understand that they are not the center of the universe. In fact, the whole concept that Jesus wants to instill in us as followers of him is that he's the center of the universe and that others even become before us. That's why Jesus said the two greatest commandments are to love God with all our heart, but what's the other one? To love your neighbor as yourself. So really other people come before you. And so what we have to learn to understand as adults, all of us here, but then what we have to instill in our kids is respect for others. And that can be not to be hurtful to others, to respect other people's boundaries. So like when an adult says no, that no should be enough. Like, oh, but, and all the excuses you hear around that, it's respecting that no. Or just respect the general limits, the general laws that are put up, whether it's in the classroom, it's at church, at IC3 Kids, that, when someone says something, an adult especially, that you respect that limit. And that's not always easy to do. And the best place, and let's just put it this way, parents, if your kids don't respect you, they're not going to respect anyone else. And so probably the most important thing you can do to help establish that respect is making sure your kids learn how to respect you. And that can be hard, especially when there's so much to do as a parent. I get it. There's some times when you're spread thin, you don't have time, you work so long, and you have both the parents are working, and it's easier just to kind of get a hands-off approach where you're not engaged and just kind of let kids say and do whatever they want. And this is one of those deals where if we start this early or begin to reinforce this, and it is so crucial to helping your kids not only respect you, but respect other people. So what are some ways that we can help kids learn to respect us as parents?
Sure. What we recognize, and by the way, I did not come into this world with parenting skills either, and didn't bring them over from my family of origin, but what we recognize through the years is that kids respect the fact that you have action with your words. Sometimes we think that just using words alone is an effective disciplinary tool or effective in that. But what we actually do is make a lot of threats. We say how much it hurts us and things like that. But we may not follow through with consequences. So we need actions to our words so that when we say, when you do this, this happens. And then if that happens, you allow the consequences. And that you can still instill empathy and say, I'm sorry, when you did this, this hurt me or it hurt another person. And so we are going to have you, experience those consequences. An example would be if a kid is just throwing tantrums. You need to be proactive, knowing that, okay, if my child throws a tantrum, I need to have some consequences spelled out for them. So if they've thrown that tantrum, you can go to them and say, right now, I'm going to think about what experiences you should have from this problem, and I'll get back to you. And so when you talk to them and say, okay, when you throw a tantrum, you cannot be with the rest of the family, play with any of your toys or any games, and you'll have to be in your room. And so if then they're going to push against that. By the way, expect a reaction of pushing against those. They are checking if actions actually follow your words. So we need to follow through. And the second thing was being proactive. Don't be reactionary. Kids really read, like when they get you to have a reaction, in one way they've succeeded in what their purpose was. But the best is not to have a reaction. This was a really hard thing for me, and my daughter back in the South, when I react, I tend to go into lecture mode. Yeah. And sometimes the kids will be standing there for 10 or 15 minutes.
Even me.
And yes.
Like, honey, I said, I got it already.
And then when I would leave, I'd think about it even more and get more mad. So then I went back and lectured them some more, as if that helped. So my kids later on in life, it was kind of a joke.
It's a joke now, yeah, we can.
Yeah, Mom, remember how much you lectured? And, once you say the point one time, kids get it. You don't have to say it 20 to 30 times in a row. And so I would just work myself up. So try to have more of a proactive approach where you can define what happens and then allow that. And the last thing is be a team. If my child is not respecting me, if you are married, I need Tom to come in, and I need him to also have the discipline for the child and say, hey, you didn't respect your mom, and so this is what's going to happen. And we have to back each other up. Right. Now, that's easier said than done, because sometimes the kids come to you and the other parent has no
idea, no clue.
No idea. So it's hard to process, well, what's happening here? Who's in the wrong? But it's best if you don't know the actual circumstances of the situation, you can say, well, that sounds, hard, Samantha. Let me go talk to your mom about that, so that we can, have a united front. Otherwise, a child will see, that they can separate you in that unity. Now, if you're a single parent, this is very hard because you are the only one. So I would say reach out to your support. Maybe you have a parent of the child, that is their grandparent. Maybe they can help back you up. Maybe you need to have them call on the phone and talk to your child. Maybe there's a key figure in their life that can come in and also reinforce your rules of respect.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so that's a big one, and our kids have learned who to come ask if they need something, right? Yeah, they know. They come to me, I'm the wimp. But it's part of this idea of being a team on this, especially when it's respect for both of you, that you're on the same page. All right, here's the last one with the time we have left. The boundary of responsibility. And so as much as we love those little bundles of joy, they are completely dependent on you. Everything comes from you. You take care of them and feed them, but almost right away, within those few months, you're trying to get them to walk. I mean, because you know that you want them to be dependent. They need to be able to crawl and then walk, because that's the whole goal of them being dependent. But that's a tough one for us, is helping teach our kids this independence. But we want them to do that because when they're 30, we don't want them living in our basement playing video games, right? That's the goal. Like, you got to get out on your own. Sorry if you're living in your basement with your, sorry. But that's the goal. We want them to be responsible. And there's three really key areas you want them to have responsibility for. And this is the process. One is their emotions. We can't live from our emotions. Our emotions, they lead us astray. They're not always honest with us. And kids sometimes are just quick to live from their emotions, how they feel. And we have to teach them how to be responsible, not to live from that. The second one is an attitude. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you respond to those situations. And so teaching them that they're responsible for their attitude and how they respond to situations in life is really important. And then the last one is behavior. They're responsible for their behavior. When I was doing student ministry and kid ministry a long time ago, I remember the excuse the kids would give for going nuts. They would always say, "Oh, we had sugar." I'm like, I don't care if you had sugar. It doesn't mean you can write on the wall. That just doesn't cut it. So I really like helping kids understand, listen, you are responsible for your behavior, not anyone else. You are responsible for doing that. And Susie, why don't you give us one, I think this is probably the biggest way to help us as parents pass that responsibility off to our kids.
Yes, we need to recognize the difference between rescuing and loving. So if you're loving children or your kids or your teenagers, adults, you allow those consequences. You let those teach the kids so that they can learn to take valuable skills about how to handle their emotions, their attitudes, or their behaviors. Rescuing means you are stepping in to remove the consequences from them, not allowing them to learn from those things. So, when our kids were in grade school, I remember there was a parent that their kids would always forget something, their homework or their lunch or anything like that. So the child would always go down to the principal's office and call the mom. And this was before she had a cell phone. But she would have the mom come over, and because they lived close, it didn't seem like a big deal to the parent. So they would run that over to them. Well, as we saw this play out in each of the grades, that child then didn't take responsibility sometimes for what they did. If the teacher asked, "Why did you forget your homework?" they might give an excuse or push against the consequence of a lower grade because of that. As parents, sometimes we confuse rescuing with loving, but we have to set those boundaries of, is what I'm doing, taking them, removing them from the problem and the situation so that they're not experiencing those, which is the loving thing, is to allow the consequences. It may be pain for a very short while, but you're going to help them be able to control their emotions and their attitudes and behavior if you don't continually rescue them.
Yeah. So what I want you guys to know more than anything is, listen, if we take the time and we're proactive and we work hard at instilling these godly boundaries, we're going to set our kids up to live with confidence. And that's really what I think all of us want. And maybe the most important thing is we want, at the end of the day, our kids to be responsible for their own faith. Because at some point they're going to leave and go off on their own. And we want them to know that they have not your faith, but they have their own faith in Jesus. And that's probably the most important thing at the end of the day, is that they're responsible for who they are in Jesus. And so as a church, we want to help. And I think that's really the big takeaway from this, is we want to be a resource for you. And we understand how hard it is to be a parent and to be parents. I give props to you single parents. Man, you guys have such a hard job. And so as a church, we want to let you know we're there for you. Whether it's Chris and Cindy, Susie, and I, we want to be a resource for you. Our church wants to help in whatever way possible. But that goes for anyone here who's a parent or grandparent. Use us. We're here to help, whether it's just wisdom, resources, anything that you need. We want to support. We want to pray for you guys, because we're in this together to help instill these godly boundaries in the lives of our kids. So if you'd like to connect with us, maybe you're new, or maybe you've been around here for a while and you need prayer, maybe you just want to sit down over a cup of coffee with Susie and I and talk about some of this stuff, man, let us know. Talk to us. In front of you, we have these first step cards. They're just really easy ways for you to connect with us and allow us us to begin these conversations. So fill out that card. Even if you just want to be on our email update list and kind of connect with us, fill out that card, and on your way out at the welcome table, just drop in that black box, or you can come up here afterwards and talk to us. We'd love to begin that conversation to help you. But it's never too late. It's never too late. Don't regret tomorrow. I mean, or the past. That's the past. What are we going to do today going forward to help our kids understand these godly boundaries and begin to live with confidence? Father God, I pray over these folks. They represent a lot of parenting hours, a lot of kids, a lot of family, a lot of relationships are here. And I recognize that there's probably a lot of regrets, a lot of things that we wish we could have done differently. I know Susie and I feel that way. But we put them in the past, and we give this moment and we give our future over to you, that you would lead us, Father, in paying attention to your word, to seek the counsel of other people, the wisdom of other people, and to know we're not alone on this journey. And it's a journey worth fighting. It's a journey worth growing in, so that our kids can live with confidence and know who you are and know the boundaries that you've given us to live within. So I pray, Father, that we'd have the courage to engage, the courage to take steps forward, and to do whatever we need to help our kids know you and live with confidence. So lead us now, Father, as we follow you, as we trust each other as a church. So in Jesus we pray. Amen.